Hey there, this is Adam, and I'm with Talent to Strength. We're going to do another session here, a little video session. I'm practicing for my Gallup StrengthsFinder presentation next week at their StrengthsFinder Summit. So this is going to be on a topic called strength thinking. Strength thinking is my approach to how do you apply the Gallup StrengthsFinder. So we're going to get into some ideas here. Let's get the PowerPoint started and working. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen, and then we'll just jump right into it. All right, so let's just start here with the title, because that's a good place to start. This is the topic, strength thinking. And what I normally do is I'll introduce myself, and I'll spend a few minutes talking about my top 5 themes. This is just to give people a sense of who I am and how I present and the kind of angle I'm coming at this topic with. And that's really important, because if I had 5 different themes, this would be a completely different presentation. And it's good to know that. Let me get my video over here. So that's a little bit about me. I'll race through that a little bit. I don't know how much time I'm going to spend even talking about it. I should do this to swap the screen. All right, so strengths thinking. A little overview. I like to start by giving people a purpose for why I'm doing something. And so for this presentation, the purpose is to enable people to further apply StrengthsFinder to their personal and professional lives in order to go from their talents to the development of their strengths. So that's why I'm doing this. I want people to go from their talents to their strengths. And the outcomes I'm shooting for from this presentation are really fourfold. So I want to increase the coach's capacity, or whoever's watching this. It could be an individual wanting to apply this to themselves, a manager to apply it to their teams, a teacher to work with students, but to guide people through the following aspects of strengths thinking. The first is to isolate the target activity for consistent near perfect performance. And this will make more sense, but you got to start with, where's the activity? What's the activity that I want to turn into a strength? And then you evaluate your talents, because that's one of the important ingredients to creating a strength. And then acquiring knowledge, another important ingredient, and developing skills. So that's the outcomes for today, and really you'll see this architecture throughout the entire presentation. That's what I'm really focused on. So the first thing I'll start with, I shared this presentation, this visual in my authenticity presentation, and it's the idea that when you take StrengthsFinder, what you do is you start with your talents. You know your top 5 themes, and before that, you didn't even know you had these 5 themes, these patterns for how you think, how you feel, how you behave, that determine your spontaneous response to the stimuli in your environment. You didn't know you had them, and you didn't know other people didn't have them. But then you take the StrengthsFinder, you read the report, you say, wow, this is uncannily accurate. And then you have names, you have language for these qualities that are unique to you. From there, that's usually where people stop. They usually stop there with learning what their StrengthsFinder talents are. They read the report, they file it away, interesting, not sure what to do with it. So what we're trying to do, and this is my focus for Talent to Strength, is to move people beyond just taking the StrengthsFinder and reading their results to applying it to their day-to-day lives. And so you see the difference between these 2 characters and their relationship to the chariot and to the horses. And the horses are sort of a metaphor for your top 5 themes, because themes are an important aspect of strength, or the critical aspect of a strength. And so we really have to get those under control. So that's a little framework for where we're going. Now, the big question, and as revealed to you by this boss of a question mark, I just want to leave it there. It's pretty nice looking. But what's the big question? The big question is, how do I apply the Clifton StrengthsFinder? That's what people want to know. That's what my clients want to know. That's what people ask me about all the time. And I don't know that there has been an adequate answer to this question, and I kind of think there hasn't been. And so this is my attempt to kind of push that forward, push this idea forward of how do we apply our themes and leverage strengths, develop strengths. So that's what we're going to answer today. So I want to introduce this idea of strengths thinking, and really it's meant to be a conversational approach. It's something that's very hard to do on your own in the kind of vacuum chamber of your own mind. But when you're interacting with someone who knows you well and who's there to kind of spot you, and their focus is to help you develop, then this is a great tool, a great approach for that. What I do when I present is I give an idea fashion show. What I mean is, I have ideation, I have a lot of ideas. I'm running them down the runway. You're going to view them and decide, does this look good on me? Do I want this idea or not? So in that case, you're free to accept, reject, or adapt anything that I say. And so I'm not trying to hoist my views and opinions onto you, but if you find something that gives you some insight, that's really what my goal is here. So the first thing I need to talk about and get this out of the way is that themes are not strengths. And the reason this is important is because you see it all the time. People take the StrengthsFinder, and because it's called StrengthsFinder, they think the results are their strengths. They think their top 5 themes are their strengths, and they're not. They are your themes of talent. And I'll have some people say, well, that's just, semantics. And it's not. It is fundamental to the entire thing. If you don't understand the difference between a theme and a strength, then you're not able to help people develop their strengths because you think they're the same thing. And so they've already arrived in that case once they've taken StrengthsFinder. So I'm going to give you some evidence. This is directly from the Donald Clifton's book, Now Discover Your Strengths, with co-author Marcus Buckingham. And it just lays out the foundation for the whole StrengthsFinder tool. And so this was the thinking of the creator of the StrengthsFinder. And so what he said is StrengthsFinder's purpose is not to anoint you with strengths, but to find where you have the greatest potential for strength, okay? Number 2, we introduced you to 3 carefully defined terms. They weren't messing around, they were careful. And the first one is talents. Talents are naturally recurring patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Your various themes of talent are what the StrengthsFinder actually measures your themes of talent. Knowledge consists of facts and lessons learned. Skills are the steps of an activity. These 3 combine to create your strength. I mean, it's pretty unmistakable. And then the last one here, StrengthsFinder will reveal your 5 dominant themes of talent, your signature themes. By identifying and refining these signature themes, you will be in the best possible position to play out your own strengths. So I just want to offer this to make sure it's clear, and we can move on from there. Well, I guess let me just say one more thing. If we're at this movement, we're at 15 million people have taken the StrengthsFinder, which is remarkable, and it's only getting faster and faster every year. Gallup's goal is to have 1 billion people take the StrengthsFinder. So that leaves 985 million people that are left to take the StrengthsFinder. Now, something I know from my experience with the people that I encounter that have already taken StrengthsFinder, they, one, don't know that these are their themes of talent and not their strengths, and that they have a lot of work to do to develop them into strengths. And 2, they even then they haven't really understood what their themes of talent are. They haven't received training or coaching to help them understand what it is that they're getting in this report. And so we're so early in the movement, and we have a lot of work to do to really get the foundation set. We, as the StrengthsFinder coaches, who are the early adopters of this movement, we need to get our mind right between what a talent is and what a strength is. All right, lecture mode off. Here we go. I want to introduce something that's just a super simple image, but I think it really reveals the power of StrengthsFinder. It's just another angle of looking at what it's like to play from your strengths. And I guess the question would be, have you ever been to a restaurant and the server gave you fantastic service? I mean, it was perfect. You wanted to tip them more than the 20% because everything was in order. The food was great. The service was prompt. They made relevant recommendations. They never let your drink get empty. They didn't hover, but they were always there when you needed something. They were pleasant in their personality. Everything was great. And so what you experienced was you received from that server a fat arrow. This comes from a mentor of mine, Marcia Schenk, and she would just make it real simple, that when you're exchanging with people, sometimes you get really good exchange, sometimes you get really bad exchange. So a fat arrow is when you get real value from something. A skinny arrow is, let's say you have a server and they were late with everything, the food was cold, they didn't seem to really care what your thoughts were. If you finally did complain, they didn't really take action to correct it. And so you just left feeling like you got really terrible service. Well, you can just look through life all over the place and see when you're getting fat arrows and when you're getting skinny arrows and how you feel about the difference. And also, you are sending either fat arrows or skinny arrows. And this is kind of what I want to get to. When you're playing to your strengths, you're sending fat arrows. You're doing things within your zone of excellence. People are really impressed. They get the full value of what you're doing. And maybe there's a time where you're doing something that you don't care about, you're not very good at, it doesn't really matter to you. So you give very bad service. And that difference there is really important in how we live our day-to-day lives. And I'll show you how. First, let me just say a few things here. All relationships are based on this kind of exchange, this kind of commerce that happens. And success depends on the quality of that commerce. If you're somebody known for sending skinny arrows, then you're not going to get referrals and recommendations. But when you do something remarkable and provide extra value, people will notice. People will send other people to you. And we all have fat arrows and skinny arrows in our quiver. And I guess you could say the equivalent would be we have strengths and we have weaknesses. And are we going to design our lives to play to our strengths or to our weaknesses? And so this is, I call it coming from a position of strength when we send fat arrows. And so how do we increase that ratio? And real quick, just fat arrows come from strength. They're energizing for you to send them, and the people who receive them want you around more. And we, like I said, we could organize our lives to play more and more to this fat arrow game. Whereas if we send skinny arrows, they come from weakness, and it's draining for us to send them. And the other people, they won't come back. They're not impressed. They want to stay away from you at that point. And we can't win playing the skinny arrow game. It's a source of depression or anxiety or both, and bad for our reputation. So just a little backdrop for why strengths are important. And then moving into the formula for StrengthsFinder, strengths equal talent times investment, and investment being specifically elaborated to say knowledge and skill. That's what you're investing in. You're developing your knowledge and you're growing in your skill. And just real quick, a couple of important things to point out. Strength, the definition from Gallup, is consistent, near perfect performance in a given activity. So that's an important feature to look at. What is the activity in which we're trying to grow our strength? Talent, by the way, I'm in Oklahoma right now, and we have tornadoes probably going on. I hear the sirens and everything. My dog's freaking out. But, you know, maybe that'll make for an exciting video here. We'll see. A talent is different than a strength. It's naturally recurring patterns of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors that can be productively applied, but they also can be counterproductively applied. So that's the relationship between a strength and a talent. And what I want to do is show you a visual of what strength thinking looks like. And it starts, as I said, with the activity. If strengths is a consistent, near perfect performance in a given activity, then we want to know what the activity is. And I think that's where a great place to start. The second thing you want to look at is how your talents fit in with that activity, how you can leverage your talents, because talent gives you the fuel. Talent is what makes you really invested in that activity, in becoming good at it. If you don't have talent for it, you're going to be less interested in it, and you're not going to have the wherewithal to pursue it further. We'll talk about that. The next piece is to look at knowledge, and knowledge is the information you gather to better perform within that activity. And what it does is it makes you more intelligent. And the etymology that I like for the word intelligent is to choose from among. That the idea that we're more intelligent when we have choices and we choose the best choice. But if I don't expand my knowledge, I don't expand my choices, and I don't know the best ways to do things. So intelligence it plays a role here in a strength and in performing an activity well. And then last are the skills. The skills are the step-by-step actions that allow an activity to take place. And so those are the only thing that produce outcomes. If we're talking about performance, consistent near perfect performance, what we're talking about are outcomes. And skills are what allow us to produce those outcomes. It's about taking the actions necessary within an activity. And the only thing that produces an outcome is an action. Talent doesn't produce an outcome. Knowledge doesn't produce an outcome. It's the skills that actually do it. But we need all four of these pieces. So just to spell it out, what we're trying to do is isolate the activity. Then we're auditing our talents. And a lot of people hear the word audit and they get all freaked out because of taxes and stuff. But what audit really means to listen. So we're really paying attention to what our talents are and how to apply them. And then we acquire the knowledge and then we develop the skills. All right, so why is it called strength thinking? So in order to do anything well, we need a certain mindset. And this is what every profession knows. Every activity knows that there's certain ways of thinking that the performer needs to have in order to do it well. So if we're going to be StrengthsFinder coaches, we need to have this certain way of thinking to help people apply their StrengthsFinder. So that's why I call this strength thinking. It's a way of thinking about StrengthsFinder, about people's talents, knowledge, and skills, and how to direct them towards an activity. And so, just two examples of what types of thinking there are. In the legal profession, it's not just enough to learn the law, the content of the law. It's not just enough to have the skills. You have to think like a lawyer. And this is what most of law school is about. It's about training you to be able to argue any side of an argument. And contrast that with people that don't have that way of thinking. They get impassioned for one side or the other, and that's the only side that they can really effectively argue. And if then, maybe. So legal training gives you a way of thinking about how to approach problems of the law. And then computer programming is another way of thinking. I mean, it's a very different kind of environment. This, for example, most of what happens in computer programming isn't the actual typing out code. It's the standing up, getting away from your desk, walking around and thinking about what you're trying to get an app or a program to do. And then you come and code it. And so it requires a certain way of thinking. But you can think of any activity. I was watching MMA, mixed martial arts fighting, and there's a certain way that if you don't think about how to go about engaging in combat, you're going to be at a serious disadvantage. There's a certain way of thinking. And you can think of any activity, any profession, there's a way of thinking that makes you successful. And so that's what I'm trying to get at here, is a way of thinking. And so similarly, there is strengths thinking, which is what we as coaches need to adopt. So let's get into the four things, the four aspects of strengths thinking. And the first one is, what is isolate the activity. So what is an activity? And a question I want to leave hanging is, are the 34 themes activities? And I'm going to say they're not. They're not activities. They can be applied to activities. Activity is behavior intended to produce an outcome and usually made up of multiple variables in order to be successful. The steps, the abilities, the resources, the sequence. And there's almost an anatomy to every activity. It starts with a purpose. Why are you performing the activity? Is it for a client? Is it for fun? Is it just something you're interested in doing? Why are you doing the activity? And then the next thing you have to think about is, what are the outcomes that I want from performing the activity? What would tell me I have fulfilled my purpose? What results, what differences did I make that tell me that I fulfilled the purpose of that activity? And then the last thing are methods. How do we go about performing an activity? And most people focus on the methods first, but they should focus on it last, as a side note. But methods are what I think are the role of the themes of talent. I think those are the hows. I think we can both be performing the same task, and you have a different set of themes than me, and we both might have a good purpose, and we both might produce really great outcomes, and we both will go about it very different ways and still be successful. So that's how I think of the themes. Which activity are we isolating? That's the important question. And it really takes a lot of rigor. I could give you an example. A student of mine said that he wanted to become better at studying. And so that was the activity. But it was still too broad. We had to narrow it down to a more succinct activity that he's trying to really zero in on. And so after talking through it with him a little bit, what we came up with was the idea that, well, he really wants to socialize more, but he does his studies first, and he wants to have more time to socialize. So if he could be better at studying, then he can have more time for socializing. Well, that's a little different than improving study skills. It's how do I estimate the amount of homework that I have is what the activity is. And then we looked at applying his themes to that activity, and then we looked at what knowledge he could acquire, and then we looked at what skills he needs to practice so that he could have that happen. So that's a really important step of really zeroing in or homing in on what that activity is so that we could get clear on the activity, and then the rest of it flows smoothly. If we don't define the activity well, the rest of this gets a little wonky, and we might have to go back and redo the work. So another point we're talking about is developing a strength versus managing a weakness. And the reason I bring this up here is because maybe it's an activity that you can't develop a strength in because you don't have the talents for it. But it's still an important activity that you have to really get handled so you can develop a level of competence. I'm going to show you a competence, and I'm going to show you a way to kind of break down what level of competence we need for a given activity. So one of the important questions is to ask, what are the conditions that would have us say that an activity was performed with consistent near perfect performance? So once we identify the activity, then we need to be able to answer the question what perfect performance, near perfect performance looks like, and can we do it consistently? Which is why another reason talents are so important is without talent, I might be able to do something one time and do it really well, but then I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't really feel myself growing with it. It didn't resonate with me. So then am I going to be able to perform at that level consistently? That's an important point. And then what is the current level of performance that we exhibit in relation to the desired level of performance? And so we have to look at our deficiencies, and I think there's two types of deficiencies. The first type of deficiency is it doesn't matter. There's activities that if we're not good at them, if we really think about it, it really doesn't matter. It's not essential to our well-being. Maybe we can ignore them if it doesn't matter. Or maybe we could manage them a little differently. Maybe we could delegate it. Maybe we could trade out with somebody. Maybe we can hire somebody. Type 2 deficiency is that it really does matter. And we have to invest in building a strength. And even if we can't build it to a strength without, because we don't necessarily have the talents for it, we could still build it to a level of competence that that requires mainly the knowledge and the skill part. So the one question that I'm pondering and I don't really know the answer to is, can any theme be used toward an activity? And it's something that I'm going to be experimenting with a lot with my clients to really explore that, because maybe there's new ways to think of themes that we didn't think of before. And I tell this story. I wanted to do some blogging, and I just couldn't get to it. I couldn't make it happen. I would have all these ideas for blogging, my ideation theme. My strategy would tell me, okay, blogs will matter if I can get readership for the blogs. But the real problem was I couldn't think of blogs that would reach the general population, like a blog that would be universal to everybody. And it wasn't until I met a gentleman who's one of the top 100 bloggers in the world, most read bloggers. He told me that when he writes his blog, he only writes it for one person. He doesn't write it to try to reach everybody. He knows that's not possible. So he thinks of one person he knows and a problem they're having, and he writes about how to solve that person's problem. And he assumes that more than that person would benefit from that. That if one person's having that problem, maybe 15 or 20% of his readership is also having a similar problem or knows somebody who is. And then he'd write another blog for another 10 or 15%. And this made me realize that my individualization theme could be used in an entirely different way. That I have that individualization theme, and I love writing for a specific person or situation, and I never thought that that would be an asset for writing blogs. So could we learn to use our themes in new ways? A little bit I want to say about activities here. These are just some random activities I put in here: sales, time management, tying your shoes. And so there's all kinds of activities. And what we want to look at is what is your level of performance, starting from the most basic level of performance and moving up to higher levels of performance. So the first thing is, let me just show you some of these activities that I came across because we wouldn't normally think of it. Of course, here's somebody with a strength in hula hoops. Like, who could do that effectively? And it's amazing. Well, here's somebody else who is an artist, and he carves these sculptures out of pencil lead. Like, these are just micro sculptures that he's made on the head of a pencil. Here's somebody who needs strength. And this is interesting, a breakdancer named Crazy Legs, and he's doing this freeze pose in a contortionist style. Like that, who just does that? So there's a world of activities that we could develop strengths in. And the reason I'm showing you all that is because Don Clifton knew he could not create an assessment tool that would measure every single person's performance in every single possible activity. That's why he focused on these themes of talent, like that he could organize into an assessment tool, and then provide the methodology for how you apply the measurement of those themes toward an activity. All right, so let's look at this ladder a little more closely. So we have these different levels of competence that we can develop. And so if you don't even know the activity exists, you're oblivious to it. You're like a bull in the china shop. This again comes from Marshall Schenk, inspired my thinking on this. We can graduate, though, from oblivious. When we become aware of an activity, we become inept. We're no better at the activity than when we were oblivious, but we now know the activity exists. We're not able to apply our talents, knowledge, and skills to it, though. We haven't even gotten that far until we made the decision that we wanted to become a beginner. I'm not good at this, but I want to be good at this, and I think I can be good at this, so you've put yourself in a whole different place. You're still no better than maybe when you were inept or oblivious, but what happens is you've made a decision to invest in an activity, and you seek coaching, and at the beginning your steps are awkward. This is what makes it hard to become a beginner, is you don't want to look foolish, but you have to be willing to do that to kind of get good at anything. So you become a beginner, and then you've learned how to perform the basic moves in whatever that activity is. Using a spreadsheet or cooking a particular meal or something like that, you could perform the basic moves. But without talent, you can't advance, and that's a critical aspect of it. You'll get as far as you can go, but to get further gains, you're not going to really be driven to do it because your talents are what provide you that fuel and ignite you to go further. But there are some things where competence is enough. Just being competent in something will get you by, and that'll free you up to focus your energies on other things. The next level, of course, is a strength, which we already defined. I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's consistent, near perfect performance. And what can happen beyond that as well is you can teach others. You could become a coach for other people because you're so good at it. And then there's another level I think worth considering is this idea of mastery, that reading a book or getting a coach isn't going to take our knowledge and skill any further. So we actually will innovate within the domain on our own if we want to go further. We invent new moves. We see it all the time in every sport. We name moves after somebody who invented it. And also what happens is others seek you out. Others notice you. You actually acquire notoriety in a positive way for what you do well, what you're mastering. Good. So I also want to take this ladder now, apply it to apply some things to it, namely the talent, knowledge, and skill part of it. So when you're oblivious, I don't even have anything there for that one. When you're inept, you're unaware of your talents. You have no identified knowledge. You haven't really identified knowledge that you have in this activity. You have no clue of the basic steps, and basically you're non-conscious incompetent. You are unaware of how bad you are at something. You graduate to the next level, and when you're a beginner, you begin to identify your talents that you can apply to the activity. You acquire content knowledge. You read books about it. You become aware of the steps, and you even begin to practice those steps. And now you're consciously incompetent. You're aware of how much progress you need to make in this activity. The next level is competent. And here you apply your talents, your themes of talent in very basic ways, but you're doing it. And you're acquiring experiential knowledge, not just the content knowledge, but experiential knowledge as well. You've done something and now you've learned some of the roadblocks or some of the little tricks and techniques involved in the activity. You could perform the basic steps in that activity without breakdown. You're pretty good, get things handled, you know you can do what you need to do. And you're consciously competent. You're mindfully aware while you're doing the activity, okay, I do this, I need to do that, and you're very aware of that. It's kind of like when you take your driver's exam. You're hyper aware of all the things around you, but you're able to do them. Strength. Let me just start here at the back this time. You're non-consciously competent. You're so good at it, but you don't even know about it. You're driving the car and you get somewhere and you're like, how did I even get here? I wasn't even paying attention to driving. I was thinking about this. I was listening to a book on tape or something like that. So when you have a strength, you apply talents in advanced ways. You actually are very diligent in how you apply your themes. You know which themes to use. You even look at your 6 through 10 themes and see how they could lend to it. You look at your bottom 5 themes and you're mindful of how those could get in the way if you don't manage that. Knowledge, you're combining both the content knowledge and the experiential knowledge. You have both working in your advantage to move forward. You perform the advanced steps of the task. You could do things that other people can't do, little adjustments you've made to perfect your approach. And as I said, you're non-conscious competent. All right, so when we get to mastery, you actually invent new ways to use your talents. You advance knowledge. You contribute to the knowledge that was already there. You add to it. You perform innovative steps, things that weren't done before. And you're super conscious. You're not non-conscious about it. You're reawakened to the activity you're performing, and you're super conscious of it. You know, you're extremely mindful while you're doing it, and you're super competent. So that's a way to think about this ladder. I think this advances our thinking about how to develop strengths. So what we're going to do, I have some worksheets I'm going to show you at the end, and when we do this on the video, you'll see the worksheets. And you could freeze them and pause the film and just read the worksheet if you want to see some of the more detailed notes. Because I only have 40 minutes for this presentation, and there's a lot to cover. So I wanted to give some handouts, and you watching this video will be able to kind of see what's on those. So go there for that. Then we get into talents a little bit, and I talked about this, the naturally recurring patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that can be productively applied. Without a talent, the activity will never become a strength. There's a lot I want to say about this myelinated networks thing, but really I think the better thing I could offer is to read a book called The Talent Code by Dan Coyle. The Talent Code by Dan Coyle is a phenomenal book, and he explains what myelin is and the role it plays with talents. And just a little, foreshadow there for you. It's about our neurons and building neural networks, and that the discovery that our body has this natural ability to coat those neural networks with a sheath called myelin. And when it wraps those neural networks, that because we use them frequently, it makes them super conductive, super fast. So this kind of gets to the anatomy of a talent, and definitely worth reading about. What are the signs of a talent? I think this is really important because then we know what to look for. One sign of a talent is you're naturally drawn to certain activities, and what feels like no big deal to you will be amazing to other people. And so our talents are hiding in plain sight because someone will tell you you're really good at it, but because it comes so easily to you, you dismiss it. And it really is a fault in our society, because what we do is we equate effort with ability. That if you didn't put in a lot of effort, then you don't have a lot of ability. And it's the reverse. It's that if something's easy to you, it means you have a lot of ability. It's kind of a definition of ability, but that's a story for another day. The activity gives you energy and satisfaction. So there's some activities that just give you energy and satisfaction that wouldn't give me energy and satisfaction because we have different themes of talent. Some people with Achiever, 23% of the population have it in their top 5. They love to cross things off their list. It gives them satisfaction to cross something off their list, get it done. If it wasn't on their list and they did it, they would go back and write it on their list so they could cross it off. I get no satisfaction out of getting something done. I wish I did. I really, really do. But I get satisfaction out of the possibility, out of conceiving an idea that could be done. And I actually take pleasure in things that don't get done, that I was supposed to have to do, but then I ended up not having to do it. So it's very different. Different way of understanding ourselves. What gives you energy and satisfaction? You learn quickly and easily in the areas where you have talents. There's some things that I just, no matter how many times you explain it to me, I cannot understand it. And then there's other things where you just show it to me and you barely explain it, and I get this flood of understanding. That's a sign of a talent. And last, your performance shows glimpses of excellence. When you're performing a talent, you may not be consistently near perfect at it, but for somebody who's just doing something for the first time, you're like, whoa, that was actually really, really good. That's a sign of a talent. This is really important. I won't do this justice, but this is the model that I go to really go from a talent to a strength. And so it starts here, it ends here, and there's 4 stages along the way. You take the StrengthsFinder, that's the beginning. You learn what your talents are. You learn that your talents are always on. They're always operating in the background. They're like mental reflexes. And so the first thing I need people to do when I teach StrengthsFinder is I need them to connect with their themes, to really not just understand them, but to embrace them, to see how they're relevant to them, to value them, and to memorize them. And then they're able to observe their themes. And if you can observe your themes happening while they're happening, then you can do the next step, which is interrupt. But for now, you cannot observe if you haven't connected to your theme. So each stage builds on the previous one. But as I said, if you can observe your themes, you can interrupt them, something you've never been able to do before because you didn't even know you had your themes. You didn't know what they looked like. You couldn't see them happening while they're happening because those suckers happen super fast. So you have to be able to interrupt them. And you don't want to interrupt them all the time or even most of the time. But there's times where your themes, these mental reflexes, will fire and it'll be a disadvantage for you. But if your themes are always on and you have the ability to turn them off, that's progress, but it's a little clumsy of an option, on or off, like a light switch. It's going to be pure light or it's going to be pitch black. Well, what we really want is a dimmer switch, something where we can dial it up or dial it down, like volume control, higher volume, lower volume. And we can learn to do that with our themes. We can learn to dial in the right amount of that theme, of those thoughts, feelings, and patterns of behavior that we need for the job without overdoing it. And so this is as far as I went for a while, but this is cultivating your themes. This is very, very important, but it doesn't get you far enough for a strength. That's what the strength thinking is about. So I thought I'd share that with you. Coaching for talent, okay, so now we would go to that worksheet, which we'll look at the end here in a minute. Knowledge is the information necessary to successfully perform the activity. So what is it that we need to know in order to do the activity? And there's factual knowledge versus experiential knowledge. There's the data, there's the observable knowledge out there in the world, and then there's the knowledge that we gain from experiencing something, and it becomes what's called tacit knowledge or unspoken knowledge. It's like if you've ever delegated something to somebody and you told them the instructions and then they did it, but there was one little thing that they didn't do that you didn't explain. But they wouldn't have known to do because they hadn't experienced it before. That's the role of experiential knowledge. So there's these Latin terms, a priori, which means knowing ahead of time, and then a posteriori, which is what you know after doing something. So a priori knowledge would be, I'm going to watch a documentary about Spain. A posteriori knowledge is, I've spent a 6 months semester abroad studying in Spain, living in Spain, speaking the language of Spain, eating the food in Spain, really understanding the culture and the politics and what's important there. we need both, a priori, a posteriori. So not all knowledge is equally valuable. And I think we can see this, for example, with students. You could take somebody with equal IQ, but one student knows they have knowledge about how to study better than other people. And so they could put in less effort and get better results because they have better options for how to study. They know how to take tests better. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily smarter, but they do have knowledge that they could apply that other people don't. Let me just move on here to worksheet 3, and then we're going to get into skills here, and these are the step-by-step activities necessary to perform an activity. There's general skills and specific skills. There's a general skill of time management, and there's a specific skill of learning how to use the getting things done method of time management. These are just some different types of skills that are listed for people who think a lot about skills. They break it down into categories like this, and so in case that's helpful for you. But what you're doing when you're practicing a skill is you're bringing structure to experiential knowledge. You're making it so that you don't have to think about it. Once you have the knowledge, you could put it into steps, and those steps are repeatable, and all you have to do now is learn the steps. And so it takes practice, it takes tracking your results and being accountable for practicing and producing those results. And that's where the coach can come in to help with coaching for skill. Both areas too. I think that a coach really can play a role in helping someone outline the specific steps of that activity. So, and then we'll get into that fourth worksheet. So what I want to do real quick is let me just pull up these worksheets so you can see them, and then we'll leave it there. So here's, of course, the diagram again. We've been through that. So here's some stuff about isolating the activity. Part A is defining the activity. And again, you have to be really rigorous about making sure you've really defined and isolated that activity. And then you have the questions here that you could work through yourself or help a client through to kind of think through that activity more. So again, you could just pause this if you want to read through it more closely. Then we get into auditing the talent, which is phase 2. And so I have some notes up here just to give you some thoughts. And then we get into some of the questions that you could ask to really think through. And you might not even have enough room here. You might need extra paper to kind of, look at each of your top 5 themes and the ways that each theme can lend to the activity. And then ways that each theme could detract from the activity. So it takes a knowledge of the themes. It really takes understanding them better. And so that's why I think a coach that understands the difference between themes and strengths would be really helpful here. So next worksheet is phase 3, acquiring knowledge. So again, some notes up top, just some things to think about, and then some questions here that you could work through. And then finally, practicing skills. Again, more notes, and then just some actual questions. I think if you could flow chart the activity, that would really be great. And then you could look at which steps of the activity you really excel at and which ones are challenging for you. And this takes practice. This is just the beginning. I just wanted to introduce these ideas to you. This is where I'm going with Talent to Strength, is I'm furthering this kind of mindset to actually make things applicable. We offer tools and resources for coaches and things way beyond just what we're talking about here to really allow you to be a more effective coach, workshop facilitator, to help bring strengths to life. If you're interested in any of that, I'm happy to talk to you about it. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. With that, I will do my dismount and say I will talk to you later.